Hello, everybody. This is John Ross with the XPian Daily Report for 7/20, 7/29, and we're so happy that you could join us today. And we got a special guest with us, Juan Thomas, and Juan's going to be sharing with his experience with Congressman John Lewis. So I'm going to bring Juan up now. If I can. You guys know I do this through various sundry means here. Where did Juan go? Brother, are you still there? Oh, shucks, I thought we had Juan. What happened? Oh. We have a technical glitch here right now. Oh. We'll hold it here a minute, and we'll be right back here. We're looking for Juan, so we'll be right back. Well, Juan's back. We lost him for a moment, but he's back, so we're going to get him back. The streaming sometimes goes down. So, Juan, we're going to put you up now in a few seconds here. There's Juan. We got Juan. All right. The high-tech stuff came through here. Sometimes it doesn't. There's a picture, Juan, with John Lewis, and I believe that's from 2012. Is that right, or some other time?
It's around that time, 2011, 2012. We were at the Congressional Black Caucus weekend, legislative weekend that I usually attend every year.
Oh, nice.
I had a chance to meet with him and talk to him on many occasions. I actually first met Mr. Lewis in college.
Really?
I went to college in Atlanta.
Right.
And in his district, actually. And he spoke to my classmates. He was one of our speakers one year for we used to have what we call chapel.
Right.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, usually every Thursday.
Right.
He was one of our speakers. And he talked about when he was a young boy preaching to the chickens.
I've heard that statement that he preached to the chickens.
He told us that story back then.
Okay, so that story's been out there a while, that he really wanted to get into preaching, so he preached to the chickens.
That's
now,
right.
I'm going to take this down, this one shot, and we'll just give a little history of Lewis, and then you can give me a little recollections here about your memories of him. I'm going to just put up a few things here that I came across. Here's something that John Lewis is probably known for quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of things he's known for, but this is one at the Selma Bridge there. This is an FBI picture. I found that today. FBI had pictures of that Bloody Sunday, I guess they called it.
Yes.
And this is a picture of that. Of course, he was right before, that was in 65. And in 63, he was talking at the big rally there, right, in
Washington, right?
Yes, yeah. So he was, I think, the youngest speaker at that rally.
He was.
I think he was was it 23 or 18? I forget now. I think it was 23, maybe.
23.
Yeah. So he was pretty young. I think some say, I don't know this for a fact, but he spoke right before Dr. King. That's maybe he introduced him even. And when he was in Nashville, he did some marching for freedom. He went to, I think, called the American Baptist College now. It had another name, but it was
American Baptist Theological Seminary, I think.
Right. It's got another name now. It was with the Southern Baptist and the Progressive Baptist, I believe, combination school. And so he was a leader. You can see him in the front there marching. And he was, a lot of times he was at the front of these marches. I mean, he was right in the midst of these things. And so what do you want to share about John Lewis and your experience meeting him many times?
Well, first, I want to thank you, John, for allowing me an opportunity to share my reflections on the late Congressman John Lewis. I appreciate your invitation and your continued friendship. So thank you for having me today. I can tell you he has been an icon from afar for many years, for many of people in my generation. Those of us who've had a chance to get to know him or spend time with him. I've always been encouraged by his stories, by his insight, by his kindness. He was always telling stories and encouraging people my age and younger. I can recall one time when I was in Washington visiting with him, was in his office. He literally took me around and showed me every picture in his office and told the story behind the picture. He's had a picture with Rosa Parks and with, Jesse Jackson and with most of the living presidents that he served under, and the civil rights era, Martin Luther King. And he just was a bundle of knowledge. And he tells personal tidbits about, different parts of people's lives, personal things that you would only know if you spent time with them. So he was such a kind man, very politically astute, very politically tenacious when it came to advocating for what he believed in and what he stood for. But he was very gentle, very kind-hearted. And he was always very supportive, very encouraging. Like I said, when I ran for Congress, I tried to be one of his colleagues in 2012. The voters did not give me that honor, but he endorsed me. He supported me and was very kind and hopeful, and said to me, look, don't give up. Never give up. He talks about the famous phrase, good trouble, get in the way. Those things have been part of what motivates me in my advocacy and civic work. And I find that when you get in good trouble, when you get in the way, you upset people, you disrupt the status quo. And if I could just say to the folks in my hometown of Aurora, Illinois, I think that's been one of our challenges, is that we don't really like people who get in the way, who cause trouble, who ask questions, who push to make society better, to make Aurora more inclusive, more diverse, more opening. And that's been a problem. That's a real challenge. But John Lewis stands as the iconic example of what it looks like to, and I'll put this in a post that I put out about him last week. He had the courage and the discipline to take his protest and his activism and put it into, or change the venue rather, into the halls of Congress. And that's really what my message would be to any young person out there today who's protesting, who's standing up for Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Ultimately, you have to engage public policy. John Lewis engaged public policy to change law, to change the way we make decisions. And so if Black Lives Matter, policy has to reflect that. And I say that in a broad context. But what I admire about John Lewis was that he was not afraid to move his activism into the halls of Congress and then try to achieve power and influence to govern and make decisions. And that's really what his life represents to me. He lived out his values. He walked, he didn't preach a sermon, he lived a sermon. And his life is, I think, a testimony to all of us of what it means to truly be someone who has the courage of their convictions, never afraid, don't back down, never give up. All those ring true to me. And I just think of, he's now in that cloud of witnesses, if you will, those
Right.
ancestors who went before him, those members of Congress, those first Black members of Congress who served after Reconstruction.
Right.
He's now with that legacy. He's part of that continuum. And I think we have to continue the struggle, continue the fight.
I was just wondering, you saw him when he was in college, and then you've seen him other times at various events. When was the last time you saw him, would you say? You remember the last
Let me
time?
think. I think the last time I actually physically was with Congressman Lewis was around 2017 or 18. I think when I was president of the National Bar Association.
Okay.
I believe, in fact, the current president of the bar, today's her last day in office, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
We're having our virtual convention this week.
Okay.
And tonight, she turns over the gavel to our next president.
Okay.
But our current president, who's leaving office today, she sent me a text because she saw a picture of me and her with Congressman Lewis when I was president.
Okay.
That she couldn't find. And I told her, I said, I never saw that picture. If you find it, please, send it to me. I'd love to see that. But she remembers seeing a picture because when I was president, she was one of my vice presidents.
I see, right.
And so I think that would have been the last time, around 2018, when I was president of the National Bar Association.
Well, he seemed to be a type of individual that wanted to mentor or teach other people, right? That was part of his, bringing up. Maybe that idea of being a preacher was that way to share more.
Well, that's why he was always talking to young college students like myself back in the late 80s. That's why he went to the Black Lives Mall in D.C. to stand with the mayor.
Right. I wish I had that picture. That was one of his last pictures.
That movement is a continuum of the work he was doing when he was in his 20s.
Right.
It's part of the same, and I think that's what young people need to understand and understand and learn history, is that these struggles are not new.
Right.
It's just the next phase. And John Lewis was saying to the young protesters, the young civil rights leaders of today, I'm with you. I stand with you. You are continuing the fight. You're continuing the struggle. And I think that's why he stood there to send that message to them. And I hope that's a source of inspiration to all of us, that, this is a long battle. This is a continuation of constant struggle to make those words true, to make this a more perfect union. And so John Lewis is what I heard one historian call one of the second founders of America, if you will, one of the second fathers. The founding fathers, of course, gave us the framework, but I think we all understand that they were flawed. They wrote and spoke of freedom, but it was not in practice. John Lewis is one of those people that has been trying to make those words true, that all men and women are created equal. They are endowed by their creator. with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. John Lewis is working to make those words real. Thomas Jefferson got it right when he wrote it. John Lewis is trying to make it actual, make it real, make it come alive, to apply to everyone, to all of us.
I want you to, I'm not quite as acquainted with the Voting Rights Act, but I know that it got sort of sidetracked by the Supreme Court, and John Lewis was trying to make corrections. You want to explain to your knowledge of what that's about, that he was really trying to pull that back as more positive legislation?
In 2013, the Supreme Court, in the Shelby decision, gutted the protection provisions of the Civil Rights Act. There were certain states that were required under federal law, under the Voting Rights Act, to get approval from the Justice Department before they changed any of their voting laws, because they had historically used state law, again, public policy, to keep Black people in particular from voting during the whole Jim Crow era. So they had these, what they call these grandfather tests. If your grandfather was a slave, you couldn't vote. Well, that impacted a serious number of Black people in southern states, particularly around the turn of the century, the 20th century. They had this penny jar test. You had to guess the number of pennies in a jar to vote. Now, those were kind of the more extreme examples, but they were laws that made it hard for Black people to vote. So the Voting Rights Act protected the right and ensured the right. And there were provisions, and I believe the provision is in Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, that required states to get approval. Well, in Shelby, the Supreme Court said there's no more need for these protections because these states aren't doing that anymore. The right is guaranteed. And the dissent written by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg made the point: when you have an umbrella and it's raining, you don't say, I'm not getting wet, so therefore I don't need the umbrella anymore. You still need the protection if it's raining. And here is the sinister act of many of these southern states. I think this happened in Texas and North Carolina, if my memory serves me right. As soon as Shelby was adopted and gutted that provision of the Voting Rights Act, certain states, Texas, I believe, and also North Carolina, that same week introduced state legislation to change their voting laws to make it more difficult for people to vote. They started passing voter ID laws. So they would allow people who had a gun license ID to vote, but if you had a student ID, you weren't allowed to vote. So why can you vote with a gun license but not a student ID? Things like that were introduced and passed. And so what Congress has been trying to do since that time, under people like John Lewis, the Supreme Court gave guidelines as to how they should restructure the Voting Rights Act. There have been hearings on this. When I was NBA president, we provided testimony and spoke on these issues on Capitol Hill. I met with Chuck Schumer personally to discuss moving the Voting Rights Act forward. But the Republicans in Congress are blocking that legislation and will not take it up. And that's the problem. The Republicans in Congress don't want to adopt substantive legislation to improve the Voting Rights Act. And look, here's the bottom line. Here's the politics of this. America is changing, John. It's becoming more diverse, more people of color, and the Republicans don't want brown and Black people and young people to vote. because they lose elections. It's all about maintaining power and their privilege. This whole issue around voter suppression is rooted in that very conversation. It's a tragedy. Again, America is a country based on freedom. All Americans who are eligible to vote should be allowed to vote,
Right.
regardless of their skin color or their politics. And so John Lewis was trying to, again, restore the Voting Rights Act because it was his generation working with Dr. King, working with people like C.T. Vivian, working with people like Whitney Young, working with people like A. Philip Randolph at that time, and other civil rights leaders who pushed Johnson and Congress to implement the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. That was their legacy. And so 50 years later, to see that law gutted was a travesty.
Right. And my understanding was Lewis was at the signing of the voting rights.
Yes, there's a picture, there's a video where President Johnson is giving a young John Lewis one of the pens.
These pens, yeah.
He was there, along with Dr. King and many other civil rights leaders.
Wow, he was pretty young then. Wow.
He was about 25 or 26 at the time.
Yeah.
Remember now, Dr. King was only 39 when he died.
I know, he was pretty young too. Yeah.
He was probably 35, 36.
But he died at 39 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he died young too.
Yeah. C.T. Vivian was the older one in the group.
Yeah, he just passed away a few days or day before.
The same day.
Actually, the same day, maybe. Is that right? Friday.
He died that morning.
Okay, he died Friday morning, and
and Lewis died Friday evening.
Okay. Yeah, they were both.
I haven't put this in social media, but I had this. I thought about this when they died. Again, I'm a student of history.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died the same day.
On the 4th of July, I believe, too.
4th of July, I think, was 1826, I think, or 32.
No, but I know they both, there was two presidents that died on the 4th of July.
Right. So I kind of had the thought that, here we have two other icons.
Yeah.
Second fathers of America who both died the same day. I think it was July 17th.
It's awesome there. I'm going to throw up a picture here that I dug up from C-SPAN. And you can see this is the carriage crossing, the hearse carriage crossing that bridge in Selma, that Edmund Pettus Bridge.
That ought to be renamed.
I looked up that guy. It should be renamed for a lot of reasons. The guy who was named after was a Ku Klux Klaner.
Klansman. Segregationist.
What was that one? I didn't quite.
He was a Klansman and a segregationist.
Yeah, right. And so it's just not a good thing. And then, of course, we just were talking about the voting rights. There's talk about, I don't know if they're going to do that or how they do that, put a name on it and put Lewis's name on the Voting Rights Act or something like. Is that, you heard about that maybe?
Yeah, so there's a talk of renaming the bill in honor of John Lewis. That's Congress has the authority to do that.
Right.
The John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020.
Right. It'd be pretty awesome. Yeah.
The state of Alabama, they have to change the bridge name.
Yeah, that bridge should be changed right away here.
That's a state issue.
Right.
Congress can't do that. The state legislature.
Is it a state highway there or something, or a county?
It's a state bridge. So
the state bridge. Okay, so they got
the state legislature has to change that.
Yeah. Well, it looked like it was a long bridge. I don't know. I saw that carriage. It took a little while to cross that. It wasn't like my downtown Batavia bridge or the Aurora bridges. It was a little longer, I think. Right. Why are they crossing there in Selma? Some river or a lake or something? You
Well, I
know?
will tell you, I've never been to Selma, Alabama.
Right.
So I have not been to the bridge.
Yeah, I heard it maybe was a lake once, but maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a river, but it sure was a long. Wow, it just took a while. It looked like
It's a good
wow,
question.
that
I
bridge
don't
was pretty extensive.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice that that would happen real soon. That's
I hope
You know,
so.
we got to honor good people. I was talking, I maybe I mentioned this, I was just briefly, just digress here a minute, but Wheaton College named a building and a section of the college named after a former congressman who was speaker. You can sort of guess who that was. I'll
I
let you out
remember.
there in the audience. That's a history or a civics question. But when the person got convicted, yikes, that name went down faster than grease lightning.
That's right. I
And
remember.
we got to watch out how we name these things. And don't, I think some of these people are, don't want to look at history about names and where they came from and et cetera. I was thinking about one other thing here along that line at Wheaton College. They've named a lot of a building there and some others for their first president, Blanchard, and he was an abolitionist. And I go, I want to honor that guy more. And they got Blanchard Hall and et cetera at Wheaton, and he was a staunch abolitionist, and they had Underground Railroad there in Wheaton and everything. But you got to watch out when you name these things. And that bridge there, that is, he was a Confederate, I think, general too, or something, that Pettus guy. But he was in the Klan. I did see that. So not too good. Not too good at all. And that would be an honor. I hope that does happen.
I
You
hope
got
it does.
any final thoughts here you want to share about your friend, John Lewis?
Well, no, just that he leaves a tremendous legacy, tremendous shoes to fill. Um, he will be sorely missed. I hope others will take up his mantle and continue the struggle, the fight. And I also hope those who were not familiar with his story or his background will take the time to read about his life, his legacy. This can't be just an African American struggle. I mean, I think what we've seen over the last several months, that many of the people in the streets protesting, calling for change, are from diverse communities.
Right.
I hope that continues.
Right.
I hope my white brothers and sisters stay engaged in these conversations, that we don't get tired of talking about all this stuff. We're really talking about who we are as a country, who we are as a people, who we are as a society. And I think it's a defining moment that we can't let slip away because we get distracted by the day-to-day, what I call the mundaneness of life sometimes. Just,
Right.
get caught in our own routine and doing our own thing. These are serious issues. And I would challenge my friends locally. I mean, I was talking with our state representative, Barbara Hernandez, recently at one of her social justice forums. And I specifically told the audience, let's localize this conversation.
Right.
Let's not just talk about these issues of racism in the abstract, institutional racism, systemic racism in the abstract. Let's talk about what's going on in Aurora.
Yeah.
What's going on in Kane County, in Illinois, West Aurora and East Aurora, North Aurora, Oswego, Montgomery. And when you have when you localize these issues, it can be very difficult because there are people that are making decisions in Aurora today, or who have made decisions in Aurora historically, that are still around.
Right. Well, I'm reading a book about discipleship, basically in the white church, written by a man in Chicago named David Johnson, who's a pastor there at a church, Covenant Church. And his basically thing is we got to rethink how we look at how we look at the church and how we do things, integrate. I mean, music, you go through the whole thing, just everything. It's got a theological point. And is it a white theological point or is it a broad theological point to bring in and more inclusive? And I think it was a very interesting thoughts there. And I think all of us have to think about Christianity. And I think John was that way. John Lewis, he knew that Christianity brings people together when they really follow Jesus and do the things that Jesus would want us to do. And I know he wants us to carry on. And I appreciate you sharing some of these moments that you had with this really, I don't know how to put it, but a very dynamic and important leader in our country. And I think a good leader, I don't know what's that, but is going to be passed on. I think his thinking and others are going to move others too. It's because he was that type of guy. He met a lot of people, and I think they understand right what he was thinking. And he did a good job of bringing things up, mentoring, in other words, or teaching. And we appreciate that. And we appreciate you, Juan. And I just want to thank Juan for stopping by for a few moments here and sharing his insights. And I just want to bring something just real fast here, Juan. We'll just bring it up here. Yeah, we'll see you Friday. And we'll see what happens on Friday. We'll see. That's still work in progress, as they say. And I want to remind everybody about the census. To do that, if you haven't done it, I've done that. And the VNA is doing testing by appointment. So get that in, 630-892-4355. And Juan, it looks like the governor has asked the state to stop. In the IHSA, there's going to be no fall football for high schoolers.
Yeah, I heard that.
And maybe some other, I guess soccer too, and maybe some other sports. Only some minor sports can continue in the fall here. And I think that baseball thing really is making people think there what's going on with the Marlins getting the virus. If they can get the virus with all that testing and with all that, watching, it could come to anybody. So we got to watch that. And you were on the school board now. That's something else. Right now, they're in there a lot of watching.
I'm pity my friends on the school board. They've got some very hard decisions to make.
Oh, yes. It's got to be really difficult. Teachers, everybody here. It's just something else. So again, Ron,
what is East and West Aurora doing? Do you know yet? I haven't heard.
I think East is doing virtual, maybe. Or are they doing no, I think they're doing more virtual than combination. I don't know what West. I haven't caught that last few days. I'm sure it's going to be out there if we haven't caught it in the next few days here, what they're doing. I think some school districts are doing both, and some are. I don't think anybody's just straight going back.
Going back, right.
No, they're either going a few days and alternate and do virtual, or they're just doing a virtual learning till probably the first of the year at least.
Right.
Until we get that vaccine. Hopefully. Right. Well, thank you again, Juan.
Thank you.
And we're going to just where's my bye-bye? Oh, here's my bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God bless you, and bye-bye. Thank you again, Juan. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.